Hi, everyone. And today, welcome to this wonderful podcast. And we have a wonderful guest with us today. How about we just start with a small introduction, Shashwati?
Hi, Simmons. First of all, thank you for having me here, and I've been looking forward to this. I have had a history of a lot of things that I've done, but the most important thing that I realized was that I was really good at helping people recognize and leverage their own strengths, their own voice. So I've been a fitness health professional. I've worked in UAE and I've been into hardcore industrial sales. And from there, that is how I started moving into helping people getting better salaries, promotions, whatever it is that is.
That's an absolutely wonderful introduction. So, the whole point of today's podcast is to firstly, again, help people, as you said, help people specifically with storytelling and their own personality and persona development. So, how about we first get into a bit of persona development? Because I think that is very important. Because
Yeah.
right now in the corporate training sector, a lot of trainings happen, but people don't get that information they're looking for. So, I'll start by a simple question, which is what is personality training to you?
Personality, I believe, is like people use the term personality as being fixed. So before going there, I would like to join in with the first point that you said that in corporate world, people don't know. Often we have trainers who come in and we were having this conversation that other the people come in, they show some tips and tricks, but they don't translate into actual points that people can use and leverage to get themselves ahead. So now the question that you asked me was personality. So personality is something that we are brought up to think that it's fixed, that it's something who you are, that it's some people are loud, some people are soft. But personality is more what I have come to realize after working with very different population is an expression of self in that moment. So, personality or your authentic self, there are multiple authentic versions of us. So, personality is it's not about our personality or being an authentic self, is more about alignment of yourself with your intention in wherever you are. So, as a parent, my alignment will be different. That will be another version of my authentic self. As somebody who works with individuals, as a coach, as somebody who helps people speak, that will be a different orientation. So I think it's more about being able to align your intent with whichever role or place in life wherever you are.
So, was there a version of you who maybe at one point struggled with speaking? Because as a coach myself, I had this version who was a big introvert, who really struggled myself first, and then I figured out my own journey. So, just wanted to know what your journey looked like.
Interesting that you brought it forward. I just wanted to, when you say introvert and you were able to, could you talk a bit more, like what? Because I know when I was looking at what work you've been doing, you're more about storytelling. So I mean your own story sounds pretty unique. So a little bit, if you could tell me.
Okay, so definitely, I think when I started, absolutely hated people, absolutely hated starting conversations, very intimidating. And that's how there was this trigger moment for me back in seventh grade when I had a crush and I really liked her, she really liked me, but I couldn't communicate my feelings. And then I had to move cities. And that day I decided that I never want to live with regret. And because of that pressing need, that pressing pain to communicate, I started my journey. First with baby steps, first maybe talking to a few strangers, making new connections. But nowadays I see people like stories. Before I used to think of people like, oh my God, why are they still here? Or are they going to judge me? Because I think we all have faced those
Yes.
moments of judgment. So, what are your
Yes.
thoughts on maybe the judgment? Because I think a lot of people, I say 90% people, think that everybody is judging them.
Yes, you are absolutely right. And it's not 90. Let's make it 120%. You're absolutely on point uh, what what happens, there's a difference. Our rational side of the brain knows, you know, but people don't really have that much of time, even whether irrespective of whether I like you, whether I dislike you. You know, most people do not have that kind of time, the kind of mental real estate that it requires to be constantly be obsessed with anybody. We have very, very short attention spans. But emotionally, we don't really understand or process it. So we always, especially when people go into public speakings or in high stakes meetings or when you know what your work is when you're pitching, people we are obsessed with ourselves. So we start thinking, you know, we are the center of attention, and it's people are just going to think about us, and they're going to zero in onto every little inflection of our voice, or let's say our grammar and everything. They are looking, you know, how is my tie, how is my coat, and how are my shoes. But the reality is that most people, like all of us, we have so much going on in our lives that we have very little attention span to give someone else. Of course, truth be told, there is a lot of judgment and criticism, and pretty harsh criticism that does happen. But that's where your point of building confidence and being your authentic self comes in, where your confidence is not like being or being, you know, this brash individual you change. No. It's about being okay with not being liked by others. Being okay, you know? Being aware, okay, I may have a certain flaws, but it's okay, it's going to pass.
Makes sense. So essentially, what you're trying to say is oftentimes people don't judge us, but we judge ourselves so much.
Very well.
Yeah. Okay. So circling back to the question, which is, what did your journey look like?
To be honest, I wasn't somebody who could speak well. I was very, let us say, I read a lot. That was my escape. So for me, books were a safe haven. I would just be there. I wasn't very comfortable talking to people, or I was an athlete. I was into sports and all, and you would think that it opens you up, but not really if you're not aware that it's something that you need to work on. So to be honest, I never had much of a need to work on it. But then what happened is when you move into a professional circle, things change. It's not school, it's not uni anymore. You need to be able to communicate with your colleagues, with your bosses. So one of the things that made me realize that you really need to change how you communicate with human beings differently at their level was my experience in Dubai. So I was working for a company and I was mainly handling industrial sales. Industrial sales, I'd gotten into it. It was a great company to work for, but the issue was that I had no clue. So I was doing something completely different, and I went into that. Now you have to sell tools. People use scarfing inserts. I have no clue. And the second thing is I have to go and talk to people on the operations floor who are all men. Men who have no time for nonsense. Almost all men who are on operations in working in these kind of sectors, actually a lot of people, they are so overworked, they have so much of pressure, they don't have time for nonsense. And also now me, I'm a girl, I'm a woman, I'm walking into this absolutely clueless. So there I am walking and I'm standing, and it was pretty awkward. Nobody, then I realized it's best to be direct and it's best to tell them. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. I don't know anything. So I lost a couple of times. I went to some companies and I couldn't understand. I went there next time. I said, see sir, I don't know anything about this. I've joined this company and we want to work with your company. But we can't offer a product that doesn't work for you. It's technical. And I don't know, at that time I didn't know what was the difference between mild steel and stainless steel. So you will have to tell me. And People always look down on a lot of men, but if you allow them, men, they are so kind and they're so, I was taught every single thing and they were so helpful. I was able to generate a lot of revenue and sales, all thanks to these men on operation floors, welders, electricians, and laborers. When you tell them, I don't know this is your job, you tell me. And that is when I think I started realizing that it was important.
So, what was that one trigger moment if you had to point it out? Because, like, definitely the journey was there where you went from not knowing how to sell, how to speak to people. But if you had to look back, do you remember any certain trigger moment that you were like, no, this is it, I have to learn this?
I had to. Now, this was next when I had gone into fitness. So I moved my niche. I went into fitness, and I had to now work with a population that did not know English. So my clientele was all Emirati women. They don't know English. I don't know Arabic. Now go figure. And I was in charge of fitness-based sales. Then I realized, no, it's not about a language barrier. I had to push myself to understand them, how to present. And the thing is, you can't learn a language in a few months, but you still need to show sales. So that was the time, the first 6 months when I started working with that population. I really had to, because I had no access to any language. So that is when people skills, that is when presence, that is when being able to communicate with very, very limited verbiage and yet being able to assign clients, yet being able to close those clients. That's what that really propelled me in this direction.
That is really a very interesting story where even without knowing the language, you were still able to make sales.
So that was very weird but nice.
Challenging? It must have been definitely challenging.
Yes. It was.
So I guess the next question that arises there is that what would you recommend someone maybe in the corporate world who is, say, maybe pitching? What would you recommend they could do to get better at what they're doing right now or get better at communicating their ideas clearly?
I think most people tend to forget is that often we are uncomfortable with silence. So we over explain and we talk a lot. I think one of the things that I work with a lot of my clients. Now, for example, a lot of people that I work with, if you see their credentials, they are IIT, IIM. So when you talk about these kind of people, the IQ is high, they're intelligent, they have engineering and they have management background. So their IQ, their expertise, their know-how, that's already, kind of signed up for. But when it comes to delivery, people tend to get uncertain and that leads to a lack of clarity. So I feel clarity and brevity. So how clear you can be, and if there is something that you can say in 50 words, can you try and say it in 15? And that can be very uncomfortable to people. So people feel we are being rude or we're being very direct. But the truth is, if you're direct and if you get straight to the point, the other person sees you very differently. They start seeing you as somebody who values their time, who's like a straight shooter. You go to them, they will tell you directly straight away. So you start to get a lot of credibility with people.
So definitely being comfortable with silence and not over explaining is what actually builds credibility. A lot of people think that, oh, I have a lot of knowledge here, a lot of industry expertise, so let me just show it off. But that can kind of work and be counterproductive.
I wanted to ask you one more thing, Sumit, before you go forward. That since I've been thinking about it for a long time to ask you. So because you spoke about your story, like how your reluctance to talk, cost you perhaps a friend. So how do you personally see, or you could teach people the difference between a good story or a story that flops? Especially because you teach pitching and you're coaching people on pitching. So how would you differentiate something that works or something that flops?
Okay, so I think the first thing to understand is that any bad story can become a good story, because a lot of people think that good stories means interesting life experiences. I can't talk about my mundane day, but that's simply not true. I think a good story is something people can relate to. If I were to talk about a Monday morning where I sit, I drink coffee, then I have to rush to the office, and I can have some interesting dialogue delivery in there, it automatically becomes a good story because a lot of people have experienced that. But a bad story is when people leave out the details. I think details just really wonderfully make the story way more interesting. I mean, when you look back, you must have definitely. Do you remember any of your grandma's stories? Like, if your grandma told you stories?
Yeah. It was all. It was such a valid point you brought up. It was all the. Either you remember the horrible parts or the funny parts, or it is those weird bits that you remember. It's all the weird bits, like what used to happen was that it was often this like we have these days, when the certain like religious things are observed, as in those like so Brahmins have these days that they do and they do not and all. So related to that, my grandmother would have these kitchen utensils, they have to be cleaned and kept and all of that done a specific way. And then she will start telling tales. Oh, this happened because that person went to that city and got, and then you start realizing half the time she'll get the stories wrong as well. But then when you sit to listen to it, after a while you stop caring about whether it's true or not. You start to find elements like this and that. So like you said, for other people, maybe it just seems like a mundane, it's something's very silly. But completely again depends on your audience. Like for us kids, me and my cousins, it was like a full afternoon, no need to get bored. And you keep supplying her with tea, and she will keep going on and on and on. So for us, it was it's like the biggest time pass ever. So I think that was a very, very wonderful thing.
I think, yeah, definitely the best stories stick. And all of these good stories, they have one thing in common, which is the hero's journey. Have you heard of the hero's journey?
Yeah, people talk about it a lot because often I think people get very, all of us, we don't like when we are in discomfort, when we have a lot of stuff on our plate that we don't want to handle. And yet when you watch our movies, when you watch the animes and everything, it's always when the hero comes out at the end and we're like, yes, we are waiting for it. But then we forget that the hero's journey means going through the bad parts of the beginning and the middle. What has been your take on the hero's journey? Because this is a concept I really like.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to hero's journey, whenever I have anything that's interesting, I try to break it down into this hero's journey. So hero's journey is quite simple. So first it starts with you in a place, then a challenge is offered to you. Now that can be a problem, a hope, aspiration, something like that. Then you follow that challenge. There is no logic behind it, but you just want that and you really crave for that. And along the way, you make friends, you have mentors. But somewhere down the line, the problem becomes so intense that you have to leave everything behind that you thought was true and really transform as a person, right? And once that transformation happens, you get something like a God's gift, where you have this wisdom that has been attained, which is helping you solve that problem. And then you reach back to your natural state. I think right now I explained it sounds complex, but if you have to completely simplify it, any movie, let's say 3 Idiots. So in 3 Idiots, they start out as students. Then after that, the transformation happens where their friend is lost. They have to find their friend. So that challenge is there. And during that, in the middle somewhere, you would realize that whatever they thought was true, that, I have to mug up and really pass the exam, and that's why I'm studying to get a good job. Rancho really flips it, right? He is like, no, do it because you like it, do it because you're passionate. And when they actually listened to him, they became completely new individuals. And in fact, in the end, if you had to compare the grown up versions of them and the college versions, you would see even though they're the same person, they've had completely different life experiences that sort of transform them. And that's how any story works.
Yes. Yes, and I think, no, I completely agree. This idea that and another thing that you mentioned, that when you start this journey, you have friends, you find mentors, but then comes the most intense part, and then you have nobody. You only have to rely on yourself. So that difficult part generally is everyone's. I think everyone struggles there. Like, it's just that probably like most people are, even people who will probably love you and they want to stand by you, who are like, in your inner circle, even they can't help you. Like, you have to rely on yourself. And one thing that I wanted to bring up, because something that, because most of my clients tend to be men, because men mostly, see, 80 to 90% of men work in high pressure, high profile jobs. Okay. Of course, women are trying their best to change it, getting into IIT, but still, like, there's a lot of skew, like men. And what I have observed, men have way more pressure on them to succeed, to make money, to what I have seen. Women have a different sort of pressure as well. But the clients that I work with, so I think it brings a lot more pressure for men, because I feel men are always taught to perform strength, not really be clear. You have to be strong and you have to be this macho and all of that. But what happens is men especially, they build expertise, but they are not able to build expression. And then they are taught to be, you be polite. So, and you don't say this and you don't do that. So it kind of, you have to mute your personality, but a hero can't mute their personality. And I'm not saying you change who you are, but having your hero's journey means embracing, that difficult part where you bring forward your true self.
Definitely, that is there. I think when you talked about bringing forward your true self, the last challenge in this whole journey is imposter syndrome, right? Because when you want to be somebody,
Yes.
all your past beliefs are just holding you back. So what would you suggest?
So true. From what I have seen, imposter syndrome is kind of that inner critic voice. And if truth be told, it never really, you have to embrace the challenge that you will face with it every single day. Because what happens? You face the imposter syndrome, let us say, and you climb a ladder, and you reach a certain place, but you are going to plateau, and you will aim for something higher. That's how human beings are created. Okay, that's how growth happens. That's how we grow, become better, earn better, express ourselves better. We want more. So going forward, that more, like you said, will mean challenging the inner beliefs that exist now. Because you are not going to go get that more before you change your inner beliefs and the framework. So there comes imposter syndrome again. So a few ways to look at imposter syndrome might be, one is that inner critic that we all have. It could be a teacher's voice, it could be a caretaker's voice, it could be anybody's voice that we often as children take on as our own. Also often it's a gap between who we are and where we want to be, the person that we want to become, and a flawed or a distorted perception that we have to be this perfect individual to get that or to be there. I think it's pretty much tied to perfectionism, because if you're not perfect, then you go back into this self-critical mode where you say, you're not good enough, you're just trying to pretend to do this. And maybe it's also about embracing that you are in the stage of becoming who you want to be. So that's a more gentler way of looking at it.
I think when you touched on perfectionism, I have been doing this observation recently that when you look at AI right now, right, AI can create the most perfect images, but it's still not satisfying because when you look at it, there's no pain of the artist, there's no struggle behind it. So I think imperfection is actually better than perfection because perfection just feels subpar now since we can achieve perfection with so many things.
Also, yes, absolutely. Also, I think perfectionism takes away the human element. Like perfectionism, it's like people kind of, I don't know, it's not that I've observed this, I've experienced this. We tend to forget that we are flawed. We are inherently flawed. And we are going to have flaws, and that it's okay. And your success or whatever it is that you want to be doesn't mean that you have to be imperfect or perfect or this flawless individual. Because that leaves you no scope for trying things or making mistakes or whatever. A good point you brought with the AI thing. Like I think AI is an amazing, a fantastic tool. But yeah, I think a lot of spaces it won't be able to, because human to human interaction is going to be flawed, is going to be full of all the things, little mistakes and weird aspects of our personality that we bring. But I think that's what makes interesting. That's all. Because you want to see something that's real. There's a voyeur in every human being. So you want to see what's real. What are they talking about? What does this happen? I think that's what it is.
This podcast kind of made me realize that our flaws are our gifts.
It always, it's just that I think maybe that we know that, but we don't really want to accept it. Sometimes you want somebody else to validate us. One thing that I wanted to ask you, something that was really on my mind, I think I heard you say in our conversation that don't sell the service, you sell the story. Right. So I wanted to know how can you remember a time when you were able to turn a no into a yes?
Definitely. I mean, that was there. So I was pitching to Bindu. It's a very famous beverage company.
Okay.
So I think that time our pitch was fine. They liked the ideas, everything was interesting. But when the moment I just asked the CEO that how did you get started with making one of the most massive beverage brands, his eyes lit up. He was so happy. So then he started explaining. So essentially what they were doing is selling themselves, right? Because once you find someone who you relate to and you ask them their story, you really empathize with them. That is the magic that turns any no into a yes. Because when you like someone, right, you would automatically want to work with them. So I think if we have to wrap up the podcast, I think let's each, to make it interesting, say one controversial take. So how about I get started?
Yeah, sure.
Your controversial take.
Sure.
I think for me, a very big controversial take is that you don't really have to be confident to be a public speaker. You only have to be comfortable. Because if you are comfortable, then the confidence automatically comes. But I see a lot of people just chasing that confidence, trying fake it till you make it, and then that they just get stuck in their own head. But if they focus on understanding how to feel more comfortable with the audience, now that could be through your breathing exercises or really thinking of it as a conversation rather than a grand presentation, then I think public speaking just comes naturally because we all are born speakers, right? We are all social creatures.
Yes. That's actually very, very different from what you hear normally, that's pretty controversial or not. I agree with that. Okay. One thing is that people feel that being loud is, great. But the truth is, loud is not powerful. Clarity is. If you're clear, you start holding a lot of power. And when you are calm, you're sharp, direct, and you're certain, that is when people listen. So instead of rushing into it, instead of speaking fast, you have to really work on your pace. And lastly, real authority comes from, this owning the room with your voice, however your voice is, your voice, not by shrinking, not by shrinking. That's how real authority is.
That is a very interesting thing. Definitely, a lot of people try to hide their voice. Maybe someone thinks that their voice is too shrill, someone thinks it's too deep, and they just want to be this
Yes,
other person.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes.
But I think when you think about it, every person who we admire them only because they are authentic. Like John Lennon, he completely stood by everything he said, right? Even though sometimes people may not have agreed with him, but definitely he stood by it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Uh,
Okay, so
uh,
yeah. Sorry.
yeah, because we're just wrapping up, I would like to tell our audience that, if today's conversation has to everyone who is watching, a big thank you, and thank you to Sumit as well for having me here. If anyone listening, if this conversation made you kind of rethink how you show up in rooms, show up in rooms that matter, decision making. I have curated something. It's called the authority fix, and it's got 5 phrases in it. So that either make you sound like you are a promotion or you're a pay cut. So you get 2 different things, and it's mainly designed for professionals who are in high stakes roles and where they are, they need to lead with precision, not under pressure. You need to have precision. And that's it. If you like it, and just message me, fix on LinkedIn, and it's yours. No sign up cost or anything. Just send it to me personally.
Yeah, and below this video, I have also linked a storytelling doc, so you can just have a quick look at it. But yeah, this was a wonderful podcast. Thank you for your time, Shashwati, first of all.
Thank you, Sumit. Thank you for having me here again.
Okay, and thank you guys. So we'll see you with a brand new podcast next time.